Thank you, Christine. I have the pleasure of introducing Kurtiss Hare from the Nightlight. How many of you have been to the Nightlight? Excellent. Since we are a night of challenges, I would encourage all of you to get there in the next month if you've not already been there. Kurtiss Hare is an executive director and co-founder of the Nightlight Cinema, a movie theater dedicated to advancing cinema and community in tandem. His talk is going to explore tactics for overcoming the obstacles that would dissolve cinema culture and the role of moving images play in shaping our collective future. He is proud to say, oh my Lord, Kurtiss, is this true? He is proud to say that he saw 145 movies in theaters in 2015, and that yes, one of them was the new Star Wars. Kurtiss Hare.
Thanks, Nicole. So this is the story of cinema, and as such, it's not just my story. In January of 2015, a critic for RogerEbert.com began a journal of the movies she saw as her father was dying. My father taught me how to watch movies, how to love them, she said. I'm not ready to lose my father. I think about scars, the critic mused, after seeing Mad Max Fury Road. Most of the characters are covered in them. I think about the green places that we want to run away to, and what happens when we learn that there are no truly safe places. How we have to decide if we'll keep running or go back and build with what we have the best we can. Meanwhile, in January of 2015, the Nightlight Cinema was doing its best business since having opened 6 months before. Oscar season is always busy because you can't turn on the radio or TV without hearing about the awards. I wrote a popular note in our email newsletter about why the Oscars matter even when they don't. Now, a couple years before, I had begun reading a book by Alain Badiou, pictured here, an old-school French analytic philosopher who's about as lovable as communists come. It was called On Cinema, and it talked about the way that cinema is a form of thinking, or more precisely, a form that thinks. Images and sounds come together to generate ideas, sometimes unaware of their own thought processes. Now, in September of 2014, only 2 months after we opened, I brought an incredible film to the Nightlight called A Spell to Ward Out the Darkness. It was not an Academy Award-nominated film, but it was the first film the Nightlight showed to inspire walkouts. Now, this is a vast reduction, but the huggable communists claimed that cinema could change the world because of what it can do with time, the way it can stretch infinities into moments and vice versa. Now, cinema's infinities are seen and heard and felt, and in a way that doesn't get along very well with the lifeless notions that philosophy has generated, the lifeless and tangible notions. Now, by October of 2015, the critic's father had passed away. Watching Guillermo del Toro's incredibly vivid Gothic romance, Crimson Peak, she wrote, Mia Wasikowska's Edith has to thwart a plot against her life. It's her ability to arrange the pieces into a coherent narrative that enables her to escape from the decaying memory palace that confines her. Now, this is how memory works, especially in late winter. The cohesive story we tell ourselves falls away, and all that remains is an image here, a remembered word there. In the same breath, she adds, we forget what the address of the old apartment was, but we remember he loved the orange kind of mulatto cookies best. The critic was knocked for a loop by how much Crimson Peak was about fathers and daughters. Edith ends the film with a gash across her cheek. She'll have a scar for the rest of her life, but she'll be alive to let it heal. If we take the closing image at face value, Edith turns her harrowing experiences into her first published novel. For Badiou, there are 4 modes capable of producing truth: art, science, love, and politics. The interplay between them is not a harmonious one. It's one of wounds, conceptions that are gnawed at and indented as an outcome of their proximity and character. What's unique to cinema, as it mixes ideas from these modes, is the way it serves us bite-sized morsels of sensible infinity. In tasting it, we are confronted directly by art's only impossibility that a sensible infinity is something to be mastered. But what does that mean? It means that new routes are likelier to arise on the human highway when our maps begin to include this immovable waypoint of death at its center. Make no mistake, we're destined to circle it, but in denying its existence, we arrive at each port of call shocked to discover the same violent port that we left from. Now, in film theory, there's a mental phenomenon called the Kuleshov effect, by which viewers derive more meaning from the interaction of two sequential shots than from a single shot in isolation. Change the image in between these two frames of Alfred Hitchcock's face, and you start to get a different idea about what he's thinking. Now, imagine that you hadn't seen the first two frames. Take the third frame in isolation and answer, what is Hitchcock thinking? In this simple way, you're generating possible futures from the same set of initial conditions. Reality, like the cinematic image, has a composition, a grain, a tone, but the way we choose to read it is also how we posture ourselves for the future. This is what cinema teaches us. There is only one inevitability, and radical breaks from the momentum of the present instant are possible in every reading of now. These are the conditions of emancipation that set aside what is and even what is likely to be in favor of what can be. Hollis Frampton was a native of Worcester, Ohio, and a legendary experimental filmmaker. He imagined that these possibilities were part of what he called the infinite cinema. His idea was that all cameras, projectors, and frames were part of an enormous singular machine whose reels extend beyond the horizons of finitude. Now, a still photograph is simply an isolated frame taken out of the infinite cinema. In it, there are endless compositions and endless cuts, some where frames break radically from their predecessors, and some where continuity is unwittingly and tragically preserved. Akron, too, has its possibilities, as does the Nightlight, and the films we show will continue to remind us of what those possibilities might be. We will provoke ourselves into dreaming new things with the full force of the world's imagination. I'll know I've failed if there are no more walkouts. Now, by December of 2015, the critic found herself watching Star Wars despite having stopped trusting the franchise after the prequels. The Force Awakens was not at all what I was expecting, she explains. I didn't anticipate that it would be so much about what happens when we are left behind and how we make sense of the wreckage and make it through. It was at this point that she had an epiphany about movies. I've been watching them with my father's eyes this whole time, she wrote. And that's just it. Through cinema, my senses become our senses. Your story becomes my story. And then we can become more sensitive to the possibility of a better future. Thank you.